So welcome to this webinar for out-of-hours providers from the GP pensions team at PCSE, but we're also joined by our colleagues from NHS England. So we've got Janet Knox, who's one of the senior team over there, and also Vicky Woolley, who is one of the stakeholder engagement managers from NHS Pensions. So we're very grateful for them coming along. And I've also got from our comms team, Debbie and Kat as well. So I'm Katrina Venners. I've met one or two of you before, but not all of you. So it's good to have so many people joining us today. I work as a senior SME in the GP pensions team here at PCSE. We have sent some communications recently to you and to contacts at the out-of-hours providers that we have anyway at PCSE, and also the NHS pensions have shared with us to explain some changes that NHS England are introducing for out-of-hours providers in terms of GPs who work for the organisations and who have their pension contributions or their pension processed as solo. And we thought that it would be hopefully helpful to invite you all onto a session where we'll go through these changes, explain exactly what is going to be different, and then there should be some opportunity. I don't think it'll take me very long to go through the slides that we've pulled together to give you that overview, and then we can have a sort of question and answer session where people can raise anything that they want to ask. So it will be easier, I think, if you could just pop any questions you've got in the chat. So just use the chat function to begin with, and we will go through that. If there's anything that needs to be taken away, either from a PCSE perspective or an NHS pensions perspective, then obviously we'll do that. And if appropriate, then we'll use some of the content from today's session to populate some more frequently asked questions on our website. So I think we can probably go to the first. So this is just the content that we're going to go through. So just an overview of out-of-hours solo work. I'm sure you probably don't need me to tell you about that, but we thought we'd just cover it off. What the current process is and what the new process will be. A little bit of time just looking at the detail of completing these solo CSVs, because we know that some people haven't used the standard template in the past, so it's just worth going through that. We did include these completion notes with one of the recent communications, or at least a link to them from our website, but we'll go through that just to cover off the next steps, then what you can expect as providers, and then that Q&A session. So I have just taken this table from the NHS Pensions Guide for out-of-hours providers, so it's got a reference at the bottom of the screen. We can share these slides around with all the attendees, that's no problem. So this is lifted directly, and it essentially says that all GPs who work for out-of-hours providers need to be pensioned through the solo route. So we can obviously have GPs who also work in practice as a GP provider, so a partner or a salaried GP, so they have their practice income that they pension, but they must use the solo route for their out of hours, rely on the solo provider. GP who only performs out of hours or potentially out of hours and 111 work, then they are regarded as the type 2 practitioner unless they've opted out of the pension scheme. So again, they have to be pensioned through the solo route. Then we've got freelance GP locums. If we've got GP locums who perform out of hours, then they must pension their out of hours and any 111 income as type 2. So that out of hours work is also solo, and that causes them great confusion, I think, because they can still pension their practice based work as freelance locum work on locum A and B forms. But if they work for out of hours providers, that element needs to go through as solo, and that means they're a type 2 practitioner. And if a GP is a freelance locum and they are only performing 111 services or delivering 111 services, then that's a very niche category, and they can pension that income as locum work. So basically, all of the GPs who work for an out of hours provider would generally be pensioned through the solo route. And the only exception to that, and I'm assuming there'll be nobody on this who would join the call, but the only exception would be if the provider is an independent provider employing authority. All of the staff for independent employing authorities would be pensioned as officers, but I'm assuming that nobody would have joined this call because they would already know that and they don't need to be involved in these processes. So that's just a quick overview of GPs. Basically, everybody's in. So just to step through the current process, the process that has been expected and up until now, and that would include work for this month. So when you're completing your April submissions, that's obviously for March work, and that's just going to be the same as you've been doing in previous months. So just to recap on what actually happens. So as a provider, you collect the GP's employee contributions from them. So based on the tier rate that they tell you that they expect is the correct one based on their annualised income or their annualised pensionable income anyway. So you're collecting that on a monthly basis. As a provider, you're making a payment along, obviously for those employee contributions, but along with the employer contributions to the NHS England bank account, which should be by the 7th day of the month following the payment. So February contributions paid in March. And alongside that, sort of almost at the same time, then the provider submits a breakdown currently, so it should be on a standard CSV format of contributions for all of the GPs who work for them, so all of the solo contributions that have been deducted in that month. That CSV is submitted to PCSE at the same time as the payments made to NHS England. And then what actually happens is on a weekly basis, NHS England sends across to PCSE a log of payment transactions that have been submitted in to the NHS England bank account for pensions related activity in the previous week. And then our team, or one of our teams, works through that log and the transactions that are on that log. If there's a transaction from a solo provider, then they'll be looking then to find the matching or corresponding CSV template that's been submitted in, and then go through that reconciliation to make sure that can be processed. When we've completed that reconciliation and we're able to process and upload the data to the system, then that GP's records, or the group of GP's records who are on the CSV, are updated by the system. Once that's all uploaded, there's a reconciliation step there because we know there's been a payment received. And when that's completed, the GPs can log into PCSE Online and see on their employee contribution statement that month that's been processed. So that typically will happen 3 or 4 weeks after or up to 3 or 4 weeks after the transaction has been paid into NHS England's bank account, just due to the timetable of events and the sorts of agreements that NHS England have with PCSE. So the GP can see that their contribution statement is updated, and on a monthly basis, of course, then NHS England pay over the reconciled contributions to NHS pensions. And that's how the flow works. And then we go back to another month and it goes round and round. So that's what's been happening, what should have been happening up until now, and currently, as I say, this month and even in April for the March work. So the new process, so this is for work, sorry, there's a typo there, work from the 1st of April 2023, essentially the payments that you'd be making from May. So starts off as being the same thing. As a provider, you're collecting the employee contributions based on the tier rate, etc. But the first difference is going to be that the provider will make payment to the employer and employee contributions to the ICB, so not to NHS England's bank account as you've been used to doing. So same timing and so on, but it will be to the ICB's bank account, and we'll come back to that. The provider still needs to complete the CSV, and it needs to be on the standard template with all the contributions data, and that needs to be sent to the ICB as well. So payment and contributions data will be sent to the ICB. The ICBs will be reconciling those payments and the CSV received by the out of hours provider. And when they've done that, they'll be logging into the PCSE system and uploading the data to PCSE Online. And by them logging in with their user account, they're confirming that they're happy that those contributions have been received. As they do that upload, then the sort of system enhancement that we've implemented recently means that those records will automatically be updated. There's no further reconciliation or any manual steps for PCSE to do. So as soon as the ICB member of staff has logged into PCSE Online and uploaded that data, then the GP records will update the same day automatically, so they'll be able to see that their solo contributions are building month to month, and the ICB will pay over those reconciled contributions to NHS pensions. So the key differences really are you will no longer be making the payment to NHS England's bank account, you'll be making payment to the ICB's bank account, and you will no longer be submitting the monthly solo CSV with all the contributions data to PCSE. You'll be submitting that to the ICB. Now, I'm going to come on to the detail of that CSV just because of some of the questions that we've had in the past about it. Just to reassure people, if you haven't heard from your ICB at all yet, don't worry, don't panic, because they have it very much on their radar to be contacting people around about now, so around about the end of March, because don't forget this is what you'll be doing at the start of May, really, but they'll be reaching out to contact you to let you know, one, what is this bank account that you now need to make these pension payments to, and that'll be from May for the April contributions and thereafter. Then the second thing is, where have you to submit these monthly CSVs? So the email address that you'll send them to, presumably it'll be an email address, and you'll be sending those CSVs to the ICB, and then they will also provide you with information on how to contact them if you have any queries. Now, I see we've got a question already, and it is one thing I should have mentioned. There's a couple, probably only maybe 2 or 3 of the providers who had already moved to PCSE Online for submissions themselves rather than using the Contact Us form to send a spreadsheet in. They are already, just seen somebody ask the question about if you have, rather than sending the CSV to PCSE through the Contact Us form, if you're one of the out-of-hours providers who has been using PCSE Online to directly upload your data, you need to stop doing that after the March date of the April payment. That data needs to go to the ICB because they need to reconcile and confirm to themselves that they've got, matching contributions data to matching payment, and then they'll upload the data directly. So hopefully that deals with that question. And there's just a little reminder there at the bottom that although we're talking about this today, then when you get to the start of April and you're submitting March's payments and March's data, you now have to you have to just do that in the same way as you have been, but it will be from the May payment that you will start making these changes. So I'm going to go into a bit of detail just about completing the CSV, just to run that through. But if we sort of pause maybe to see if there are any questions at the moment, because I think there's a few maybe. So we do seem to have 1 or 2 ICB colleagues on here. I think we will, Janet and I will deal with those questions separately because we want the focus to be on out-of-hours providers on this session. So we've got Liz is asking about, we're subcontractors, so have no contact with the ICB. So where do we send contributions and the CSV? Janet, is this a good time to talk about the mapping work that your team have been doing with the ICBs to make sure that we've got all of the out-of-hours providers that have contracts with the commissioning entities captured and covered?
Yeah, happy, Katrina. So as this piece of work, NHS England has been working with ICBs to identify which out-of-hours providers they currently commission for this service. And what we found is that there may be some out-of-hours providers that cover multiple ICB areas. And what we've done is we've had a session with Vicky from NHS Pensions, and Vicky's on this call as well, to identify and just go through and run through to make sure that where ICB has provided us with information that those providers are in fact employing authorities for pension purposes, and GPs would be pensioned via the solo route. So we completed that exercise last week, and I believe that this one, Liz, probably came up as that subcontractor, but I think it would be good just to understand, when you're saying we are subcontractors, who is it that is actually employing you as the providers of this service? And maybe Vicky, you may be able to pick up on what we do in that scenario.
Yeah, okay.
Thanks, Janet. If you can note who your subcontractors to, who you're a subcontractor of, sorry, wrong grammar, then we can sort of take it from there. There we go. So SCAS. Don't know if Janet and Vicky know who that is,
I
but
think
sorry.
it's the ambulance service, isn't it?
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So is it South Central Ambulance Service?
Yeah, we did discuss this one last week, Vicky, didn't we?
Yes, we did, yeah. I have just sent that spreadsheet back to you a little bit earlier today. These ones for the South Central Ambulance Service, they're trusts, so all employees are based as an officer. So there's nothing for out-of-hours providers on these.
Okay, so I get, thanks, Vicky. So I guess, Liz, if you've currently been submitting, then we just need to reach out to you and get you, and discuss and make sure the ICB picks up with exactly what needs to be done. We don't have employed GPs yet, so I think we need to pick that up direct, I think, with Liz. So Paul has said that they're a GP federation. Yeah, so I guess that's maybe it's another scenario. Does the GP federation have out of hours contracts, and the solo work is there, therefore solo is the correct pension route? But I guess, Janet, it's just where we make sure that all of these scenarios are on the ICB radar, because these would all be organisations that would be submitting their solo payments, wouldn't they?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so we can make a note of that one. I think Priya's asking about the new ICB details. So I think what I was saying, Priya, but it is worth recapping on that. So we, PCSE, obviously we've brought together with NHS England and NHS Pensions this webinar just so that we can bring people up to speed with what's happening at a local level. 42 in the country, I guess it's fairly local stroke regional level. The ICBs themselves will work to kind of their own timetable in terms of how and when they contact you. So all I think we can say at the minute is sit tight. It is very much on their radar. It is also year end, isn't it, for everybody? So don't panic if they've not been in touch with you over the next few days, because you're not going to be making payments to them or sending data to them until early May, if that makes sense. It was just really to give you the heads up. Okay, so we've got question about, we have an out of hours contract, this is from Jean, but subcontract some GPs. Do we need to account for their contributions? So these are GPs that are working for the out of hours service, Jean, and Vicky can correct me, but from what we've picked up from the NHS Pensions website, then all GPs working for out of hours services should be pensioned through the solo route.
Yes, Janet and Shelley gave me a list of some employers the other day, and we've double checked them, and some of them are down as independent providers or they're down as direction employers, and in those cases then we can't do it through solo. They all have to be as officers if they're employed. Yeah.
So I guess it's just if anybody is from an organisation and they're not sure about where they come under in those different scenarios, then perhaps just put that into the chat and we can pick that up for you and make sure you've got the clarity so you know what needs to happen. So I think, Scott, your question's probably similar to Priya's about when the ICBs will be contacting people. I don't know that we've got a deadline for that as yet, Janet, but I think it's a good question from Scott, isn't it? That at what point, if you haven't heard from your local ICB, should you be wondering why? What we've asked though, Scott, is that all of the ICBs provide us at PCSE, and I think probably NHS Pensions, with the contact point for out of hours providers or for solo queries. So because clearly it's tricky because we can't answer the questions when things have been looked after locally, but we do want to be able to signpost people. So we will be making that available sort of middle of April. I would hope that we'll get that on our website. Janet, I think you were going to come in.
Yeah, it's just obviously for Scott's information. So this has been brought in quite quickly. So we've been trying to run a pace with this, Scott. What we said to ICBs was for them to provide information of all the commission services that they were running for out of hours providers, and that we would pick that up with NHS Pensions to confirm that those organisations held employment authority status for pension purposes. We've completed that exercise just last week with Vicky. Like Vicky says, she's just sent that information back. We intend to share that with your ICBs now, so that they can then start their round of engagement. So it may be that they were waiting for this list to come back from ourselves, but now that we've got it, we'll be able to, we were in contact with ICBs for them to start picking up conversations with you about when to send and where to send the cash to and the spreadsheets and everything. But as Katrina said, this is April work with May contributions. So I appreciate it's short notice, but we have a little bit of leeway to get that information out to you. But we were doing that validation exercise just before ICB started to reach out to yourselves for the information.
Thanks, Janet. I think there's one from Olivia. I'm just trying to see if I can summarise it. It's quite detailed. Problem with the ICB previously went to CCG was around expected pay dates. Out of hours GPs working 1st to 30th of April will be paid on 19th of May. We could have pension details and payment across the ICB no later than 23rd of May. They feel this is too late for them to pay. They've already done the main payment run. Are we okay if June is when you receive? There won't be any late payment fees passed on, will there? So late payment fees isn't something that I don't think any of us can comment on, but I guess if the timing, I think, is the question there, Janet, about the sort of, I guess, the expected or the published 7th of the month kind of, and that's the date that's because of when not monthly payovers happen to NHS pensions, isn't it? So it presumably would just go into the following month.
I mean, these organisations, NHS England and ICBs, make payment to NHS Pensions by the 19th. They've got to upload that information 2 days prior to that, so it's always around the 17th to hit bank accounts for the 19th. So I think we just need to run through, Olivia, with your ICB on that expectation, and then just check that with NHS Pensions. When we talk about late fees, it's NHS Pensions that issue late fees, payment fees. So we could pick that up and then be able to provide a response to you if that's okay.
Thanks, Janet. Let's just stick with the question. So Russell's just checking, is this for contributions collected through the April or May payroll? So it will be through the April payroll, won't it? But pensions paid in May. Is that right, Janet?
Sorry, yes, I was just trying to grab a drink there.
I thought, don't tell me I've been telling people this wrong all the time. Yeah, so it's the April payroll. So as a provider, you're collecting them, aren't you, in 1 month, and then they're paid over, in theory, the next month, subject to the caveats that we've just been talking about some of the timings. Okay, so I'm going to we can come back to questions. If people have got more that they think of, then please do feel free to add them in. So for anybody that's not aware, I think probably most people are, but there is a standard CSV template that is supposed to be completed with the monthly solo data, and up until now sent to PCSE, and obviously some people are uploading direct to PCSE online, which is great. What we have found, in all honesty, is that the template, some of the CSVs are like an older version, or there's one or two providers who've been sending things in a slightly different format, and that requires kind of a lot of correction by the PCSE guys before we can actually get the data into the system. So we did, it was one of the reasons why we published we made an attempt to contact out of hours providers about a month or so ago, just to highlight that there is the standard template and to ask people to start using it, become familiar with it, so that because when you start submitting to ICBs, they will need you to use that template. They will need to be able to, once they've reconciled to your payment, directly upload that to PCSE online. And if it doesn't have the right columns as a CSV, or if there's missing data, etc., it will reject and they won't be able to upload it. And then they will have to sort of liaise with you, and they're not, they need to be able to just pass this information through. They're not resourced up to deal with all sorts of queries. So this is just a reminder, really, that if you go to the PCSE website, there'll be a direct link in this slide pack. But when you go to the PCSE website, if you go along the top and you select service and you select GP pensions, you'll see a whole load of different tiles that are presented. They look a bit like the two that are on the screen, but this is one layer before. And one of the tiles or buttons says out of hours providers and enhanced access providers, something like that. If you click on that, then that's where you'll see the information that's relevant. And the two key things really are the monthly CSV spreadsheet. So if you click on that button, you will then just be taken to CSV, and then a little mini kinds of set of completion notes that we'll go on to in a second. There is a guide telling you what to do to submit your solo to PCSE, but of course we're in the process of updating that, because from next month you'll not be doing that anymore, but you will still be you need to use the standard CSV and you need to complete it in full. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes highlighting a few things on that. The columns on the CSV go across the way. I've just listed them down for ease of reading, really. So obviously first name, surname is self-explanatory. There's the bit in the middle that says mandatory. Most information is mandatory. On the CSV, the system needs the boxes to be populated or it won't accept the data. But national insurance number isn't mandatory. But if it is known, you should enter it. General Medical Council number, so GMC number, isn't mandatory, but again, you should enter it if known. But what is mandatory, and where we get a lot of missing data, is the GP's SD number, the pension scheme membership number. Now, if a GP doesn't know their SD number, they can obtain it from NHS Pensions, but actually, as long as they can log into PCSE online, and every single GP in the land does have access to PCSE on the line, PCSE online. So they've had it since the performer list service went live, which I think was in about 2019. Probably only about 60% of GPs or something like that have ever logged in. But if they log in, they can see such rich information about their contributions. So anything you can do to encourage them to log in is really welcomed. But if they log in and they go to the employee contribution statement, it will tell them on that what their SD number is, and they can tell you. So they can either, that's probably quicker than, and Vicky and the NHS pensions team would probably welcome that, rather than making a call to see. But also any correspondence that they've had from NHS pensions will have their SD number usually on the top right hand corner as well. So they should know it. They should be able to get it for you, but you need it before you can complete the template, before you can send the data to the ICB. So that's the first thing. There's then the unique payment reference. Now, this is the format of the unique payment reference that we had agreement and when payments were going to NHS England's bank account. So we've left this as it is, and it needs to remain in that format, because that's then what will be uploaded to PCSE, even although the payment is going to the ICB. So it's the first 4 characters of the ODS code for your organisation. So if the ODS code was ABC01, then it would be ABC0. Then it's SOL for solo. Then it's the month. So if it's April, we've got APR as an example, and then it's the year that the payment's for. So example at the bottom there is showing us what the is showing us what the format would look like for this example. Then the next point, and if you move along the columns on the CSV, you'll come to the financial month. This column that needs to be in numeric format. So, and it's based on calendar year. Don't ask me why, but just remember that it is. So if you're completing the template for June, then you put the number 6. If you're completing the template for January, you put the number 1. So that's a numeric month. Then you've got the year in 4 character format, so 2023. Then the next few columns as we go along should all be very self-explanatory. It's just a note to say if it's an amount, a value, so if it's the pensionable pay, then it should have 2 decimal places. So in terms of pounds and pence. If there's anywhere where there is no value to be entered, so professional expenses is obviously common, but also the AVC columns for the different types of AVCs, you need to enter a 0 if there is no value to enter. It just needs to be a 0 in the box or in the field. You're just jumping back up to column L. So if you're going across the way, you'd come to the contribution rate, so the tier rate, and that has to be in percentage formats. We've seen quite a few files fail uploads because the format hasn't been as a percentage. And as I say, decimal places, we need where there is a value to enter, then it needs to be 2 decimal places. And then column W, we're trying to get the title of that column in the standard template change, but it still, as it stands, says NHS PSEA code. It's actually the ODS code for your organisation that needs to go in here, and not the AA code. And I think I can see someone asking about your constituent out of hours providers. It's their own ODS code that they need to go in. There's a question from Jean about if a GP's been on a tier that's too low, will there be a form specifically for this? So obviously for the majority, they will reconcile that as part of their end of year and do that as part of their end of year certificate. But if you need to make sort of an additional payment, then in just for employee contributions, because you've had to deduct more to make that up, then you can add an extra row to the CSV, Jean, and that will then, so the GP, say you've got 10 GPs, they would be on there for the normal monthly contributions for that month, but you would then have an extra row that just had zeros in a lot of the values, but you had a value in the employees, so that can be added in. And likewise, amendments to correct overpayments. So if we're talking about overpayments in year, then yes, they can be added on as a separate minus line. Obviously, if it's an end of year reconciliation, so it's another year, then we've got the implications of that. So that would be done as part of the end of year processing, rather than your day-to-day, or sorry, not day-to-day, but month-to-month uploads. So we've also got, so I think there was a few questions about ODS numbers, and I think Janet's already answered that. So
Put the search in.
have you put that in, Janet? Have you?
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah, so we've got that link. I think probably what it is worth doing is when we've got, because some of the organisations, what's quite difficult for out of hours providers is ODS doesn't recognise it as an organisation type. So it doesn't, it has them with all sorts of weird and wonderful codes sometimes, and sometimes with multiple codes. So we, as we go through and get the mapping from NHS England as to the out of hours providers that need to be mapped to particular ICBs, then we can check and confirm what ODS code we've got in the system, and sort of let people confirm that back to the ICBs and make sure that they check that with you, that you've got the correct code. So I think that's probably makes sense to do that, rather than if there's more than one code, and as luck would have it, you put a different code on. It doesn't happen for a GP practice or an ophthalmic practice or a dental practice or anything like that. They have a one and only one code, but we've seen it for some providers where there's multiple. So we'll just try and avoid any issues with that. But yes, Priya, it shouldn't be the AA code, it's it's the ODS code. That guidance, I think, was probably about a year or so ago that we first published it, but I appreciate the template still says the EA code at the end, so that does obviously cause a bit of confusion. Are there any other questions that anybody has? Or is there anything else? I was just going to say if either Janet or Vicky wanted to mention anything else. We have got one more from Claudia here, so let's have a look at that. So we have sessional GPs who we pay across contributions the following month, but also salaried GPs who are paid across in the same month. Is this okay to start paying the salaried GP contributions across from April onwards rather than May? So I don't know whether that's a question that needs to be taken away with the particular ICB, Janet. It's obviously not one that PCSE can answer, but so I think if I've understood Claudia correctly, there's salaried GPs and sessional GPs, and there's a month difference between when the contributions are being paid currently. I think, Claudia, you're asking if you can pay them in the same month, I think. Yes, thank you. So I don't know if we need to take that away.
Yeah, I think so. Claudia, if you can just put in which out of hours provider, so I can link it back to the ICB that you've commissioned, rather, has commissioned the service, please.
And then the $1 million question, really, from Russell, what's the reason for changing the process? And I should probably let Janet answer that, really, but it's an instruction from NHS England Central Finance is why we've changed it, Russell, but I don't know if you want to add anything else, Janet.
No, I think that's obviously suffice that it's as part of the move to ICBs. Russell, it was always intended that out of hours providers at some stage would stop paying pension contributions into NHS England's bank account through delegation of CCGs. It was a time that it was going to be done then, but everybody went delegated at different times. So NHS England have took the opportunity for the introduction of ICBs to roll this out. It's not a PCSE instruction, it is an instruction from NHS England central team that this is the way that we're moving.
So I think there's a couple of more comments. So I think
Russell, I get it. You're probably you're in, you're out. But this will be the process going forward. It's all been standardised, and this is the process that's rolled out and will be in play for as long as ICBs are in play.
Yeah, it is what it is. Just going to the one above from Jean, saying we've got a GP that is out of area. Would we have to make a payment to a different ICB? Most of our GPs are on a West Yorkshire performer list, but one is on Cumbria. So Jean, it's about who your contracts with, which is probably a question I don't know whether I want to ask, whether any of the providers on the call have got a contract with more than one ICB. Don't know if anybody wants to put the hand up if they have, but if you've got a single contract with the ICB, it doesn't matter where you're getting your GPs from. Well, sorry, they do need to be on the performer list, obviously, but it doesn't matter which part of the country. It's not relevant to that. So that one's okay. And Jill's saying she's in the same position as Claudia, Cumbria Health, on call, Brisdoc. Sophia, I can see your question from an ICB perspective to be picked up separately. Okay, I think any final points or questions anybody wants to make? Penny's probably illustrated what I was talking about. She's looked on the portal and there's 4 ODS codes, which is why I was saying let's get that mapping and get the code that's already recognised in the PCSE system, because that's the one that will be mapped to your ICB. So we'll square that circle over the next month. Then we have a question from Di. We have various ICBs and 80 pensionable GPs. So how will it work? Does it go on which performers list they are on? Di, can you just, if you've not already told us, can you tell us which organisation? Yeah, I'm assuming, Janet, that some of that will have already come out in the mapping. I know we haven't had time to catch up about it, but if there's an organisation that has contracts with multiple ICBs, then the ICBs themselves in a separate forum did say that they would discuss how to best handle that. So we need to confirm that to you, Di, so you can let us know where you're from. Nora, is that the same scenario? So contract with a different ICB? Do you mean you've got contract with more than one ICB? Di's Integrated Care 24? Or is that a different scenario? You just let us know. Maybe just put yes. Okay, so you've got multiple ICBs. So we've got Di and Nora thus far. Nora, have you already said where you're from? So we just need to make sure these are picked up. And to be honest with you all, this is why we wanted to have this session, sort of this week rather than wait till later on in April, because we were sort of predicting there'd be a few creases that needed to be ironed out. So, because PCSE already have a contact and engagement with the out-of-hours providers, then we thought we would set this session up. And so really grateful for you all taking the time to come along and get, any of the things that need to be checked out and confirmed on the table. Thank you, Nora. I can see that now. That's great. So brilliant. I think if we can probably leave it there. I don't know, Janet, if there's any other final points you want to add?
No, I mean, I appreciate it is short notice. Obviously, this decision to move to not submitting payment to NHS England's bank account is short notice. Whilst the expectation is that you all get it right from April, if PCSE, for whatever reason, receive contributions from yourselves for work from April, we do have a little bit of a grace period agreed so that we can iron out any issues that we experience. But I would add that certainly by June, the expectation is that you all follow this standardised process, submit payment to ICB bank accounts, and also submit that CSV template with full information to the ICB for them to reconcile the payment. This is again about making sure that GP's records are updated in a timely manner. So the ICB will need that information because previously PCSE may have reached out to you, but it'll be the ICB now that's having that engagement. So as I say, we do have that little bit of grace period, but I don't want to go into that grace period if possible. But where we've got issues, then we can look to resolve those before we get to June. But yeah, thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you to everyone. We will send out these slides to you all, and like I say, your individual ICBs will at some point in the coming weeks be in touch with you, but we will also look at that mapping and get the ODS codes checked out and make sure that we've got, that everybody understands what code they need to enter. And as I say, the SD numbers, I know Vicky put some helpful information in there for any GPs that are struggling to identify the SD number. But obviously once you've got them to go through the pain of telling you that, then they'll need to do it once, don't they? And then you have it. So thank you very much and have a good afternoon. And let everyone else go and bid you good afternoon. Thank you.